Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
In this real side experience, I would find myself initially within the confines of my consciousness representing recreated physical level house. No other individuals would be present, and I seemed to be preoccupied with compiling a book documenting the creational phenomena and body type that is the werewolf. For indeed, such body forms exist, and is simply another vessel or vehicle for awareness to animate through and experience the isolated ideas of creation, by which comparison with the all is everything can be provided, and recognition of the true reality ultimately established. I have had innumerable experiences with the werewolf body type on the real side, as I have shared over the years, and although little would be revealed as to the specifics of the details contained in the book I was writing, it was safe to formulate the assumption that its contents were in reference to my real side experiential encounters with this particular body type expression. In the midst of my writing, I would receive, as though an impression or thought form, specifically an invitation, to assume a position in multi-dimensional creation that would serve as a temporary residence for the duration required for the completion of my book, as though to accept such an offer would be advantageous where my writing was concerned, an environment more conducive for such a task mayhap. I would neither question the offer or deliberate over it, accepting of such a proposal, and consequently I would be relocated from my house and to an alternative location. I would find myself now within a large and very lavish mansion, the decor and furnishings rather quaint and of a bygone earth-based era. As it transpired, the owners of the building, and indeed those that had extended the offer of taking up a temporary residence, were in fact vampires. The vampire, like the werewolf, another body form type, effected from a particular consciousness design, and where the general proclivity of such beings is to operate in abrasive and dark force affiliated capacities. Over the years, I have recounted my real side experiences in relation to vampires also, and over the recent weeks have my interactions with them become more frequent. For indeed, only a few days prior to this real side experience, as I occupied an awareness view position between the real side and the physical, that I refer to as the in-between state, did another dimensional body type manifest in my bedroom, an excessively tall character, of a height far exceeding that which the ceiling should have allowed for. But it must be realized that such phenomena and body types are operating in their respective real side environments. That I perceive them as being present on the physical is due to my awareness not being completely encased in the physical level affording physical body apparatus. I am rather straddling the two positions, that of the physical and the real side, and invariably the experiences will incorporate the physical level bedroom as the overall scene, but where features from the real side bleed over and are thus not limited by the environmental restrictions imposed by the physical level. This individual was clad completely in black, his height approximately 15 feet or so, I would estimate, and his face seemed shrouded in darkness, no features of which could be discerned. Impressions revealed he was a vampire, and although he exuded quite a menacing presence, he was as though checking me out, so to say, as opposed to harbouring malicious intentions. I would engage with him telepathically and enquire as to his visit, but he seemed unresponsive and would eventually fade from my room. And now, within the mansion of the vampires, impressions suggested their intentions were in actuality malign, although on the surface they were extending their assistance where my werewolf book was concerned. For they had much by way of knowledge in regards to the werewolf body form, and indeed a very extensive library boasting all manner of ancient writings, tomes, parchments, and documents. A veritable treasure trove of information pertaining to creational happenings over the eons, and the various body types operating in the simulator. Evidently they had lured me in with the promise of information, that although I had detected a hidden agenda, one that would be detrimental to myself, as according to them, I went along with the situation regardless. For as I have always found, every situation is an opportunity, and even if we are unable to impress upon the experienced participants the real purpose of his recognition, if nothing else, every predicament is another viewpoint comparison for our own recognition of the true reality. I would never actually see my vampire hosts, as though the scenes had skipped where my direct engaging with them was concerned. Impressions assuring me, however, that this was indeed the case, and where having accepted their proposal, I now was resuming the compiling of my werewolf book within the walls of the mansion, making use of the facilities and the information the library contained. There would come a moment where one of the vampires would, however, feature visually in the experience, a particular individual assigned to me, operating as though my assistant in regards to my book. A female that appearances suggested was in her early 20s, though in reality, as the vampire's body form is practically eternal and rather frozen in time, it's rather difficult to determine the actual age of them. It seemed I wasn't the only individual who had been invited to take up residence. a small group of humans also would be present, and for whatever reason they were, impressions revealing they, like myself, had come of their own volition. As I mentioned, underlying the surface front, that of assisting me with my book, was the actual intention of my demise, and it seems that the female vampire assigned to me was tasked with my eradication. The idea was that my guard would be completely down, as she ensured a secure standing in my good graces, and at the optimum moment she would strike. It was as though the vampires were aware of my heightened other dimensional abilities, made possible via the real awareness, and so rather than simply launch a direct attack on me, they deemed this method a more reliable mechanism for my destruction, luring me with the promise of assistance, cultivating a false sense of security, and then attempting my demise when I least expected it. Although they hadn't factored into their calculations the fact that through my real awareness impressions, I already had determined their malicious scheme, and was always then in a state of readiness. In actuality, we can only experience according to the idea agreements we harbour. I can only be killed or harmed by others if the idea that this can be so not only features in my consciousness, but I hold attachment to it. Absent of such agreements in regards to others, and despite their best efforts, they will be unable to inflict harm upon me. For without the idea causality, there can be no effected simulation. And so, realistically, I needn't even be in a state of readiness for potential attack. Simulated experience in relation to my would-be assailants will just roll out in accordance with what I am deciding anyway, and in association with my agreements. The vampire female would always have the appearance of a typical human, but it seems this particular breed of a vampire, and there are innumerable versions and variations of the vampire body type, could at any moment transform themselves, adopting a far more monstrous form, and interestingly also becoming invisible, which was rather a useful attribute where the assaulting or slaying of others was concerned. And so it was that at a certain point, where I and the other humans were congregating in a recreational area of the mansion, the female vampire would elect to eradicate us. Her transformation, in conjunction with her becoming imperceptible to the eye, heralded her imminent intended attack. However, I would as though connect with her telepathically, just as she was on the verge of her attempted elimination of myself and the other humans, and afford her an instant thought-form download of everything all is related, the real purpose of creation, the guides, the new you song, the awareness process, etc., and so forth. This rather halted her in her murderous tracks, and although, even as we provide the opportunity of the all is, not all will be accepting of it or even remotely interested, in this case the female vampire would indeed be receptive, and as though an immediate metamorphosis would take place, as she fully embraced in that moment intent for the recognition of the true reality. As I mentioned, every situation is an opportunity. Our primary objective is presenting the option of the all is, and very often we may find those most receptive through somewhat unorthodox means, as this experience would exemplify. The female vampire's intent realignment became immediately known to the other vampires of her kind, as though they shared a sort of hive mind consciousness collective, and she had no other recourse than to go on the run. I'm uncertain what became of the other humans in the mansion, though they had witnessed the attack, and in realization then of they being brought to the mansion under false pretences. As for the female vampire, I would ensure, as best I was able, as best as the parameters of her agreements allowed, her protection, accompanying her wherever she went, with her vampire associates hell-bent on her destruction. As the architect of her experience, it falls on her as to the ability of others to harm her, and indeed the ability of others to afford assistance. We each design our movies and assign the available roles others can assume and the parameters by which they can operate based on our agreements. And at a certain moment, having evaded her vampire pursuers for a duration, she was captured and bundled into a van, where she was to be driven to a certain location and terminated. The van's secure design disallowed her to exit, and its destination would ultimately be a kind of mechanical crusher, where she and the van containing her would be destroyed. Although unable to prevent her capture, I would manifest inside the van with her, accompanying her on her journey, and where my intention was to liberate her from the van at the moment it reached its destination, and prior to the moment where she and the van were to be crushed. The scene would fade before the female vampire's fate could be determined. The success of my intervention would be dependent on her agreements in actuality. So, in essence, she not only had created her predicament, but according to her, could she be extricated from it. But regardless of what transpires with her body type, the awareness that she is cannot be in any way compromised, and with intent established with the all-is, her journey begins to real freedom. And maybe I will continue to write my werewolf book on the real side, but in an environment absent of ill-intended vampires. In the unrelated scene that followed, I would again find myself in my physical level recreated house, which on the real side generally represents the consciousness, as I previously alluded to. As the deciders of our simulated experience, it is the ideas we have created, or those, as created by others, we have agreed with, that formulate the consciousness as the engine room generating our situations and lifetimes. That as the house represents the consciousness, every idea that makes up the consciousness construct that we retain agreement with will symbolically be able to feature within the confines of our recreated physical level homes on the real side, including the body types of others. In this case, I would be operating on the ground floor, and anything transpiring there would represent then more so agreements we are one-dimensionally physical level conscious of, as opposed to the upper floor, which is more the other unseen dimensions, where all agreements are instantly their effects, but which we may be unaware of, unless revealed to us, prior to they manifesting in whatever way they might, physical level-wise. In my presence would be my father, though impressions revealed this not to be the genuine individual, but rather a real guide adopting his form. The guides having a tendency to assume the outer guises of older siblings and parental figures, as they often do. I shared on a recent real-side experience that revealed to me was how social media platforms carried certain videos that potentially could serve a means by which communication with other dimensionally based body types could be possible, as though the videos presented as portals and where interaction with these other beings through them, and for the orchestration and coordination of beneficial physical level projects could take place. Revealed now would be a similar idea, though rather than the utilizing of created videos and social media content, it was as though ingrained in particular movies released throughout the decades of the filming industry were potential mechanisms of connection, and where a frequency link between the viewer and that which was contained in the movie be established. This I would be explaining to the guide in my father's form, though naturally he would be aware of it. Nothing is beyond the knowing of the real guides after all. That as I turned on a television set in my living room, which was presenting one of these ingrained movies, I fail to remember which, as it was one unfamiliar to my personal self, a film from the 50s or such, so I would seemingly have the attunement or body form facility where I could establish a link with the frequency within the data of the movie being displayed. Visually, this presented as a glowing green tendril of energy emerging from the very television and wrapping itself about my ankle and leg, and where I would then direct my focus on the screen and as though open a portal through it, potentially allowing me to access the dimensional position made available. As it transpired then, this was a project created where certain recorded movies throughout the years had a certain frequency incorporated that connected with other dimensional positions. Certain individuals had the ability to tune in with these frequencies while watching the particular movies, and the generation of portals to other creational positions made possible, where like the social media videos, embedded in such a way that served a similar mechanism, so this was another viable means of connection with other dimensionally placed beings and body types, for the purposes of potential future beneficial physical level project coordination. Although the television movie option suggested the possibility of travelling to other dimensions, or the beings residing there manifesting on the physical level Earth, whereas the social media videos were more conduits, strictly for communication purposes, as seemed to be the case. And there the experience would end, and it will be interesting what further developments in regards to this will be unveiled.